Good evening. This is Pastor Barbara, aka Preacher with Parrots. Today is my mother's birthday, August 26th. This is 1500. This is our Wednesday night Bible study. We're live with our Wednesday evening Bible study, and we're also taping on our YouTube channel, Preacher with Parrots. Last week on Wednesday, we talked a little bit about the book of Amos. We got three Old Testament prophets that are jumping into our lessons at the same time. How is that possible? Well, the last two Sundays, we've had even a bigger incident of that. We are studying in the Reese Chronological Bible, meaning that this trip through the Bible, we are studying things in the order in which the events happened, not in some other fashion. Sunday, a week ago Sunday, at the same time that little Joseph, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had 12 sons. Well, when Jacob had only 11 sons, his youngest went out, irritated his older brothers, and they sold him into slavery. During the couple of years of time between the time Joseph, a little boy, is being sold into slavery and the time he grows up and becomes the governor of Egypt, we have some interesting things happening to one of his older brothers, Judah. Judah has a son by the name of who marries a girl and dies before she has a male child. Well, everybody has to have male children to take care of them when they're older. I mean, there was no insurance, you didn't have bank accounts, there was no way of getting yourself ready and prepared in those days. The Levirate law, which we have 2 more Sunday mornings studying it, kicked in, and it was Joseph's older brother, his responsibility to see that the next oldest son married her and gave her a male child, which would be legally the son of her dead husband. His name was Onan. He didn't refuse, but he didn't complete the job. And he was killed. Judah, little Joseph's oldest brother, had another younger brother, had another younger son. Judah, you can't blame him. He had 2 sons. Didn't want to lose a third one. And that particular lesson is out on YouTube now. At the time that lesson ends, Joseph is already grown. So we have these 2 incidences that are very well known in the book of Genesis happening at about the same time. They're happening in different places. And this is what we're happening now. We're in the period of history of the divided kingdom. We have Israel to the north, 10 tribes. Judah, yeah, same Judah. Judah to the south, 2 tribes. Judah so far has fairly decent kings. Some serve the Lord pretty good, some serve him real good. Judah doesn't have kings that serve the Lord. So they're going downhill. Judah, God gives them more prophets than what he gives the divided kingdom, the smaller kingdom of Judah. Israel has more. Amos speaks to Israel and tells them that at some future time, David's tabernacle will be restored. David's tabernacle was not the whole tabernacle. It was a room, a tent he made. I think I told you last Wednesday I'd bring you a picture of it today, didn't I? And I don't. I can't do it because I'm using right now the computer that I have that picture stored on. I should have put it on on another device. You may remember it's just like a tent, but more colorful. And inside is the Ark of the Covenant. And for the period of time that David had it there, worship went on 24 hours a day. Well, he's prophesying, in that day I will raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, and close up the breaches thereof. And I will raise up the ruins, and I will build it as in the days of old. No, I'm not telling you this is prophecy fulfilled, because it may be, it may not be. But today, there are, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 places in the U.S. where various Christian groups or churches have raised up a tabernacle of David, a place where there is worship 24 hours a day. Some of it is liturgical dance, some of it is instrumental, some of it is singing, some of it is scripture. Then we have another king, Hosea. I was going to read a little from a different version of the Bible from you. We've done chapter 1. Let me go over just a couple of the verses. The Lord tells Hosea to go marry a woman who's not really a nice woman. And he wants her to have children who aren't going to be all that nice. He says, go find yourself a prostitute, someone who will commit adultery with you. And he says, marry her. And then he says, speaking to the whole nation of Israel, this is God using a prophet whose name is Hosea, saying, you, Israel, have committed the worst kind of adultery possible. What could possibly be the worst kind of adultery possible? God tells Hosea to tell Israel, you have not been faithful to me. Whether she has committed adultery or whether she has not, I'm talking about the nation now. If we don't love the one we're supposed to love, how much worse can that be? What can we do besides that's worse than losing our love? Then he talked about the king Jehu. And he said he killed many people at the city of Jezreel. Remember, he killed them off there by the wall? And then he says, I will not forgive them anymore. But he's talking about Judah, the 10 tribes in the north. But he says in verse 7, I will show love to the people of Judah. Why would he show love to the people of Judah and not to the people of Israel? Because the people of Israel didn't love him. Do you know how hard it is to love somebody that doesn't love you? On Sunday nights, we've been talking about some of the last letters that the Apostle Paul has written. And he has talked and taught how easy, he says, women, submit yourself to your husbands. But, husbands, love your wives as much as, number one, as you love yourself. I haven't met too many men that aren't in love with themselves. Or women. We love ourselves. But he says to men, love your wives as much as I love for the church. And I died for the church. Then he says, wives, submit to a man that loves you as much as I love all of you. That's not hard. Here he says, that's because Israel is no longer my people. Now, we ended last week right there on 8:19:15. I'm going to continue in this version. He says to his children, this is how Israel is going to be brought back to the Lord. The northern 10 tribes. Talk things over with your mother. She isn't acting like a wife to me anymore. She no longer treats me like a husband. Tell her to stop looking and acting like a prostitute. I'm going to jump down to verse 4. I won't show my love to Gomer's children. They're the children of other men. Their mother hasn't been faithful to me. I will block her path with bushes that have thorns. I will build a wall around her. If she looks for her boyfriend, she won't find them. But the day will come, and she'll say, I will go back to my husband. God is telling the prophet Hosea what to tell a nation. You have gone after other gods. You haven't loved me. You don't love me. But now he says, I will love her anyway. I will love her back. This nation whose kings haven't served me, whose people haven't served me. She'll go after her lovers, but she won't catch them. Because I won't allow it. I gave her plenty of silver and gold. God says he gave a lot of gifts. He gave a lot to the nation of Israel. And what did they do with it? With the silver and gold that God gave them? What did the nation do? They made statues of Baal, Baal being the best known of the pagan gods. So I will take away my grain when it gets ripe, okay? When her fields are ready to be harvested, there'll be no crops. I will take my fresh wine when it's ready. When the grapes are ready, I gave them to her. I will put a stop to the special days she celebrates. All her happy party days, I'll put a stop to that. I'm down now to verse, I think it's 13. Israel burned incense to the gods that were named after Baal. I will punish her for the time she did that. She decorated, now he's obviously describing a woman, but he's talking to Israel. He's describing an unfaithful lover. Israel burned incense to gods named Baal. I will punish her for the time she did that. She decorated herself with rings and jewelry, and she went after other lovers and she forgot me. He's talking about a nation that has forgotten God and is taking the blessings it got from God and is serving other gods with those blessings. So now I'm going to draw her back to me, talking about Israel. Now, at this point in time, Israel has not been taken off the map yet. We're in the divided kingdom, the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah. Israel is going to come off the map. And then Judah will not start behaving so well itself, and Judah will be led into captivity. But then Judah will be brought back to Jerusalem after 70 years. And eventually, we now have the entire Israel. But at the time this is being spoken, it hasn't happened yet. So now I'm going to draw her back to me. She hasn't gone anywhere at the time this is being written. I will lead her to the desert. I will speak tenderly to her. I will give her back her vineyards. I will make the valley of Acre a door to hope for her. And she will love me, and as she did when she was young, as she loved me when she came up out of Egypt. Whoa! When they first came out of Egypt, that's when the nation was born. Before that, there were a bunch of families, and the head of each family, Abraham, Job, and other family patriarchs, were in charge of the daily and the religious life of their families. But now, since coming out of Egypt, now we have a nation, and the name of the nation is Israel. Now Israel is divided. All right. Couple more verses. And we're going to go to another prophet. A new day is coming, announces the Lord. Israel will call me my husband. There are so many instances in the Bible where God speaks of himself as the bridegroom or the husband, and he speaks of the people as the bride. What do we await in the rapture or in the resurrection? What are we expecting? We're expecting our bridegroom. What is this 7-year period called? During the 7-year period of tribulation on earth, those saints that have been resurrected and gone with the bridegroom, what is that period of time called? The wedding feast of the Lamb of God. And what kind of a bride is the bridegroom, Jesus, expecting? A virginal bride, not one that's had several lovers. That incident was taken care of during the 1-day, 2-day, 5-day, however long the wedding feast was. That was one of the earlier things that was taken care of in mother's tent or wherever the situation was. It was determined that she was virginal. And this is another instance where we, the people, are being referred to as the woman, as the bride. And God is being referred to as the bridegroom or the husband. That makes it a very, very precious relationship. Israel will call me my husband. She will no longer call me master. See, in the Mideast, your husband is your master. You better believe it. But she said the day will come when she will refer to me as husband, not just master, not just my boss, but somebody I love. She will no longer speak about the gods she named after Baal. At that time, I will make a covenant for the good of my people. What is a covenant? Agreement between two people. Both people are bound by it. But they're not bound by it until they both agree to it. And if one breaches, the other is not responsible. At that time, I will make a covenant for the good of my people. I will make it with the animals and the birds of the air. I will make Israel my own. She will belong to me forever. This is prophecy. Some prophecy is fulfilled immediately. Some is fulfilled farther down the road. Some is fulfilled so far down the road we haven't even gotten there yet. And some prophecy is fulfilled more than once. Some prophecy was fulfilled at the time of Christ and will be yet fulfilled again. I will make Israel my own. She will belong to me forever. I will do to her what is right and fair. I will love her tenderly and will be faithful to her, and she will recognize me as Lord. Do you know that you're the only one that can make somebody your Lord. You can be purchased and become a slave. But only you can make somebody Lord. When Mary, the Virgin Mary, had just conceived, and her cousin Elizabeth was 6 months pregnant, and they met in Jerusalem, Elizabeth said, I'm favored because the mother of my Lord has come to see me. Now, in a Catholic prayer, it says because the mother, the Catholics refer to Mary as the mother of God, but God pre-existed Mary. But Jesus was immediately to Mary, even though he was an unborn child. He was the Son of God. And Elizabeth says, I'm blessed that the mother, not the mother of God, but the mother of my Lord. You make somebody Lord. That's your choice. If you don't make that decision, it doesn't happen. She will recognize me as the Lord. I will plant her in the land for myself. I will show my love to the one I called not my love. He said a while back, I don't love her anymore. But he says, now, that woman that I said, I don't love you anymore, I'm now going to say, I love you. God had it with Israel. But he said, now, I'm going to tell Israel, I'm going to love Israel. Remember how many times I say, we have to be God's people? Or he'll say, if you'll be my people, I'll be your God. But if you don't want to be my people, the choice is yours. Well, he had chosen not to make Israel his people. But now, I will say, you are my people. And I will say it to those that were called not my people. All these years that Israel, the northern tribes, did not consider him to be God, he did not consider them to be his people. He sent Elijah, Elisha. How many prophets did he send them? And they will say, you are my God. Right. Now we're going to read Hosea, 2nd chapter. And we're going to go to Jonah. I think I'm going to stay in the same Bible that I was in. I had just closed it, but let me go to it. It's not the very next book. So let me get it. I had closed it up already. Oh, this book doesn't. So we've had Amos and Hosea, and we've had Obadiah, and now we go to Jonah. Jonah has nothing to do with Israel. Message from the Lord came to Jonah. The Lord said, go to the great city of Nineveh, preach against it. The sins of its people have come to my attention. But Jonah ran away from the Lord. Well, he wasn't a very obedient preacher. He headed for Tarshish. So he went down to the port of Joppa, and he found a ship going to Tarshish. You know, he's supposed to go where? To Nineveh. So he's looking for a ship that's going to Tarshish. Why? Because he's running from the Lord. The Lord wants to send a prophet to prophesy to a nation, and they're running from the Lord. He didn't want to go, so now he's running from the Lord. But the Lord sent a strong wind over the Mediterranean Sea. A wild storm came up. It was so wild that the ships were in danger of breaking apart. Now remember, I told you that to go from Israel up to Tarsus, to Nineveh, he would have had to have gone north. You can go by land. Remember, Israel's one border is the Jordan River, and the other border is the Mediterranean Sea. By sea, you could often make a much shorter trip, but you don't have the protection that you have by land. And the wind was their fuel, and you sort of read the Farmer's Almanac to know what the wind was going to do, and the Farmer's Almanac doesn't always come out like it says. The Lord sent a strong wind over the Mediterranean, so wild that the ship was in danger of breaking apart, and the sailors were afraid. So they started, anybody knows, you throw things overboard to make the ship lighter. But Jonah was below deck asleep. Captain went down there and said, "How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God for help." I was thinking earlier today, and it's over there. I'd have to get up and go reach it. But you remember the little doll of the high priest. And on his chest, he wore a pectoral. And it was like a muff. Remember, ladies, the muff, you could put your hand inside when it was cold. It folded over. For the Jewish nation, now casting lots is not anything they invented in Las Vegas. Casting lots was something they did at the foot of the cross. Well, we'll throw this, we'll see how it lands, and we'll decide who gets Jesus' clothing. Casting lots was not new. There were laws that existed in places, and God chose to accept the laws that already existed. He didn't make from scratch all of the laws he gave the people. Some of the laws already existed. And casting lots was one way that God gave people to arrive at decisions. The high priest wore a pectoral, and inside he kept, we don't know if they were coins or stones, but there were two, Urim and Thummim. We don't know the exact manner in which they were thrown or cast, whether it was, if they land the same, it's yes, if they land differently, it's no, or we don't know, but God had a system, and it involved these two objects, the Urim and Thummim. And when you read that people would go to the priest and inquire. They would say, let's go inquire of God. So they would go to the high priest. And the high priest would take the Urim and Thummim. Well, this was not the Jewish nation. But there were other countries and cultures that also believed in casting lots. Sailors said one to another, come, let's cast lots and find out who's to blame for getting us into this trouble. And they did. And Jonah was picked. So whether they lucked out, whether their gods answered them, who knows? And so the captain went down and, they said, what horrible thing have you done that's brought trouble on all of us? What do you do for a living? Where'd you come from? What country are you from? What people do you belong to? And he said, I'm a Hebrew. I worship the Lord, the God of heaven. Yeah, I'm running from him, but I worship him. Yes, absolutely. Thanks for looking it up, Dogwood. He did go in the exact opposite direction, and that's what so many people do. They don't go like to a slightly different church. They just leave him altogether. And they found that he was running away from the Lord. They became terrified. The sea got rougher and rougher. And he said, pick me up and throw me into the sea. Then it will become calm. I know it's my fault that this terrible storm has come upon you. So the men did their best to row back to land, but they couldn't, and the sea got rougher. And they cried out and they prayed, Lord, please don't let us die for taking this man's life. They didn't want to kill him, but they didn't want to die either. Don't hold us accountable for killing him. Then they took Jonah and they threw him overboard, and the stormy sea became calm. When the men saw what happened, they began to have great respect for the Lord. They offered a sacrifice to him. They made promises to him. You know, sometimes what people really need is to see a miracle and know who the Lord is. Pagan Catholic, yes, exactly, Dogwood. Moral is one thing. Usually moral and Christian is the same thing, but sometimes it's different. He didn't want to kill Jonah. If he could have, even they already threw things overboard, and he tried to row against the wind. And here, a supposedly godly man is running from God, but he's not doing the moral thing. He's not obeying God. And a man who isn't godly as we see godly is not wanting to take his life. He finally, you know, sometimes you have to take a life to save a life, as in war. And but he said that at that time he had great respect for God. And sometimes we give people no reason to believe in God. If they could look at us and what we do, or what God does in and for us, and respect him. All right, here we go on. The men began to have great respect for the Lord, and they offered sacrifice, and they made promises to him. But the Lord sent a huge fish. Nowhere does it say whale. Where do we get whale? We get whale from the same place we get apple in the Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden says fruit, doesn't say apple. Bible doesn't say whale. Whale is the biggest fish we know, so we say whale. There's a fish in the Caribbean. It's not as far as Puerto Rico. I went through the Caribbean from the Panama Canal on a ship then I got off that ship in Puerto Rico where I preached a couple of revivals. But in one of those islands, before you get to Puerto Rico, maybe a few hundred miles, they have a fish, they call it a Jewfish. It is not a big fish. It is not anything like a whale. But they call it a Jewfish because to them it's the biggest fish they've ever seen. And they refer to this story. But the Lord sent a huge fish, which probably no longer exists. And Jonah was inside the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. I wouldn't want to be smelling that air. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord, and he said, when I was in trouble, I called out to you, and you answered me. I almost drowned. I called for help, and you listened to my cry. You threw me into the Mediterranean. I was in the middle of its waters. They were all around me. Your rolling waves were sweeping over me. I almost drowned in the waves. The deep waters were all around me. Seaweed was wrapped around my head. I sank down to the bottom of the mountains. Yeah, there's mountains in the bottom of the... Did you know there's mountains in the bottom of the ocean? They are, and when the waters go down, you look at them and you call them islands. If it was flat land, you'd call it land, but, you know, the Hawaiian Islands are some mountains. And when the mountains grew a little bit more, the waters went down a little bit more, we have these various peaks that we call islands. But he described them very well. I went down to the bottom of the mountains. I thought I'd died, gone down to the grave forever. But you brought my life up from the very edge of the pit. You're my Lord God. When my life was nearly over, I remembered you. My prayers rose up to you. They reached your temple in heaven. Some people worship the worthless statues of gods. They turn from grace. You want to give them? But I will sacrifice a thank you offering. You know, Israel had the thank offerings. I will sing a song of thanks. I will do what I promised. Lord, you are the one who saves. And the Lord gave the fish a command, and it spat Jonah up onto dry land. Now we're in the 3rd chapter. So the message came to Jonah from the Lord a 2nd time, and he said, guess what he said? Same thing. Command didn't change. Go to Nineveh. Announce to the people the message I give you. Y'all know how this story ends? Or as far as y'all know, is this the end of it? He goes to Nineveh and preaches. This story has even a weirder ending. Jonah obeyed the Lord. He went back to Nineveh. It was an important city. It was 3 days to see all of it. 3 days to walk around a city that long ago. On the first day, Jonah started into the city and he announced, goes into the city, and this is what he hollers, "In 40 days, Nineveh will be destroyed." The people of Nineveh believed God's warning. Did y'all know that there was a time I was a street preacher? When I went to Bible school, the first year I was there, they just divided us up by what class we were in. And we had gospel teams. There must have been a couple of dozen of gospel teams. And they all had freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. There were about 9 or 10 in every group. So out of that, they had to get a singer, either a quartet or a trio, and a couple of preachers. And maybe somebody to play an instrument. Well, we got a Poochie there. Oh, how sweet. Put him up closer. I've got you on the smaller computer, and I don't see him there. Oh, how sweet. Oh, thank you. He's darling. He looks like my baby. I'll get mine later. Thank you. I've got you on the smaller. Well, it's not that small, but I guess that screen it is the smaller of the two computers. Anyway, the college had a pump organ. And I was a freshman. I was 16. I had never had piano lessons. But I had music theory. So basically it was in my head, it wasn't in my fingers. And you had to pump to get air into the organ. Well, I could only play in 2/4 or 4/4 time. Because you can't go, da, da, your feet don't do that. But on the street, when I was 16 in Chicago in Bible college, we gave a few street services. We preached in missions and churches and other places. But in 1953, before I left as an evangelist, street services were still things people did. Let me check something here. I'm checking something, but it's not working out. All right. I happened to be in the middle of a street service when I was called to work with Hispanics. There was a bracero program involved in Texas then, and during certain times of the year, Mexican citizens came up legally to work during a period of time when they needed extra farm labor, and then they went back. And I was called to preach, but I was with a different church, and I thought that I shouldn't preach for a year until they got a chance to know me better. Even though I was trained, college graduate, all of that, I just didn't think it was the moral thing to do. Expect strangers to give you their pulpit. I mean, you pastor a church, you protect your people by protecting your pulpit. But I was still a preacher. That hadn't changed. So I preached on the street. And on one of those Saturdays I was preaching on the street, there was a Mexican show, a Spanish show, and the Mexican laborers, about 200 to 400, were lined up waiting for it to open to get in. And I suddenly felt, wow, I'm out here preaching to a little gathered congregation in English. Wouldn't it be nice if I could do this in Spanish? So I started looking for a Spanish hymn book and a Spanish Bible, and it all started a couple months after that. But old Jonah, he goes out first day. First day, he says, in 40 days Nineveh will be destroyed. The people of Nineveh believed his warning, and they decided not to eat any food for a while, so they're going to fast. They put on black clothes, and they did what from the least important thing to them to the most important did. In other words, this is strange. God doesn't ask us to do this. But they're given a message of doom. How would you respond? They're not sure. So they're going to stop partying and doing things that aren't fun and get serious. The news reached the king of Nineveh, and he got up from his throne, and he took off his royal robes, and he dressed himself in black. And he sat down in the dust. Remember when people got bad news? There'd been a death, whatever. They sat in the dust. They put dirt in their hair. They took off their clothes. They ripped their clothes. He did that as a message to the people, and he said, I give my nobles this order, the king of Nineveh. Don't let any person of animal taste anything. Don't eat. This includes your herds, your flocks. People and animals must not eat or drink anything. I know it doesn't make sense to us. Many thousands of years ago, we've learned. They didn't know. They're questioning. They're trying to be humble. Stop doing what's evil. Don't harm others. Who knows? Maybe God will take pity on us. He might turn away from his anger and we won't die. And God saw what they did. They stopped doing what was evil. Look, with no specific message, they stopped doing what was evil. You're right, it's a mammal. Oh, dogwood. Wailed for God. Oh, yeah. And inside of the whale, yeah, I thought about it when I said that about the fish. But a person has said it so many times, I guess I just figured everybody realized, or everybody did know. There is a difference between, there's differences between mammals, which we are, and fish. Fin, skin, internal, yeah, a lot of differences. So God took pity on them, and he didn't destroy them. You tell somebody now, you're evil. Stop doing evil, and people say, yeah, so? But we're now in chapter 4. We're going to finish early tonight. Jonah is upset. He became angry. he prayed to the Lord and he said, Lord, isn't this exactly what I thought would happen when I was still at home? That's why I was so quick to run to Tarshish. I knew you were gracious. You're tender and kind. You're slow to anger. You're full of love. You're a God who takes pity on people. You don't want to destroy them. Lord, take away my life. I'd rather die. It's like the Lord called you to go give a revival. And the Lord saves everybody right away, and the evangelist is mad because he has to stop preaching what he's preaching. An evangelist is one who preaches to the unreached, the unevangelized. So if you're preaching revival and everybody becomes evangelized and everybody becomes saved, then that evangelistical outreach is over. Oh, there's a lot of preaching that needs to be done, but not by an evangelist. The evangelist would then have to go somewhere else and evangelize. And then the pastor and the teacher would take over. But Jonah said, see, I went and told them you'd destroy them if they didn't repent. No, they repented and you didn't. He wanted to see them destroyed. But the Lord replied, do you have any right to be angry? Jonah left the city. He sat down at a place in the east. He put some branches over his head, sat in the shade. And he waited to see what would happen to the city. Then the Lord sent a vine, and it grew up over Jonah. He either sat there a long time or that was a pretty fast-growing vine. Made shade for his head. It made him more comfortable. And Jonah was happy he had the vine, because now he's sitting in the shade. But before sunrise the next day, God sent a worm. And the worm chewed up the vine. Must have been a hungry worm. And it dried up. So the sun comes up. And God sends a burning east wind. And the sun beats down on Jonah's head. You see, first Jonah gets shade, and then the shade is taken away. And it made him weak, and he wanted to die. He's always wanting to die. Said, I'd rather die than live. Well, we've heard that story before. But God said to Jonah, do you have any right to be angry about what happened to the vine? I do. I want to die. But the Lord said, you're concerned about the vine, but you didn't take care of it. You didn't make it grow. It grew up one night, and it died the next. Nineveh has more than 120,000 people. They can't tell right from wrong. Nineveh also has a lot of cattle. So shouldn't I have concern for that great city? And that's the end of our lesson for today. There's we're coming up on yet another prophet, and Isaiah is about to be born. There is one chapter. Let me take a quick look at it. Well, it's only 5 verses. I'm going to let it go till next time. It doesn't make a lot of sense to put it in here now. We have one more. We have 5 verses in Hosea I could mention, but we go from here to Amos. Has some prophecies, and some of these prophecies seem strange to us. It isn't like, remember the first prophet? There was a little boy named Samuel, and he heard a voice, Samuel, and he thought it was the drunken high priest Eli, and he goes running, yes, sir, what can I do? And Eli said, I didn't call you. But Eli had been at one time a great high priest. He was in his late 90s now, nearly blind, almost dead. His kids didn't serve God. But at one time he did, and he knew better. And he said, the next time you hear someone say, Samuel, say, yes, Lord, your servant answers. And God told Samuel, you go tell Eli such and such. Well, prophecy isn't always that way. In some of these cases, the ones we will read about when we get past the 70 years in Babylon, where God would say to Daniel or to Jeremiah such and such, and that would be it. But with other of these prophets, God would have them do strange things, or at least things that to us seem strange. But in the explanation of why these things were being done, like maybe if you experienced these things and it was months or years, things would dawn on you and you would have a better understanding. So we're getting into some of these minor prophets. Well, it happens sometimes with the major prophets too. It wasn't where God would say, go tell the people such and such, and they would go tell the people. That would be simpler in our way of thinking. But that's not the way it was. Now, if you'll hang on for just a moment, I want to close our video. And until the next video, blessings on you.